I've done this talk a few times, and uh, I want to tell you about a recurring dream I've had as an adult. I've only had one recurring dream, and whenever I do this, other people go, "Oh, I've had that dream." So it must be those of you who I know. There's quite a lot of you psychological types. You probably know the reason for this, and I don't. But anyway, here's the thing: it's based around an exam. So it's either in my old school hall or it's in the kind of generic university hall. But you can imagine the setting. You sit down for the exam, and there's all the people and the desks all around, and the person effectively says, "Your time starts now," and you turn the paper over and you look at the things on there and you think, "I don't know any of this. I've not revised any of this," and there's that sinking feeling of, "Oh no." I've either I haven't bothered to do any revision or I just have been revising totally the wrong stuff. Is it just honestly put your hand up if you've had the dream a bit like that? Right. Okay. There's probably some generic thing in that. Okay. But I want to segue from that into this passage because we all have, I mean, I know some of you have got exams coming up in the next couple of months, but all of us have got an exam coming up. On Judgment Day. Isn't that amazing to think? It says here, verse 32, all the nations, every person who has ever lived will be sat in a massive hall. And there's a point at which they say, turn over the exam paper. And I guess here's my question to you all. Do you know what's going to be on the exam? Because in this exam paper, it's actually really easy. There's only one question. And just like with every normal exam, you already know going into the exam, the idea is the principle is you know what's going to be on the paper. You shouldn't get to the point where you turn it over and go, I didn't know it was going to be that. Because most exams, most of us have thought about it. And so we've done our revision on the stuff that will be on the exam, not the stuff that won't. We're not kind of guessing here. That's supposed to be the way you do an exam. But the one exam, the exam of your life, has one question on the paper. And so here's my question to you. Do you know what the question is? So that when you get to the exam of your life, you go, looking forward to this, is a cinch. I've got the answer to this. Bang. Or do you wander in there sitting down like I do in my dream going, turn over the page. I just didn't realize I hadn't realized this was the one question. So that's what we're thinking about today. Now, in a sense, it's no different to what we've been talking about yesterday. It's just a really sharp clarification of the stuff that we've been thinking about thus far. So we've been talking about, remember the first talk, I guess the big point of the first session when we looked at those parables, particularly the bridesmaids, was you need to be ready, keep watch. Those are the two words, keep watch. You keep saying, keep watch, because you don't know what time. It could be a long time, it could be soon. So you need to live your life as if you're looking out, you're ready for that day, you're ready for the exam. You've done your revision. Okay? And then we saw yesterday that what does it mean to keep watch? Well, we saw yesterday as well that in some sense, being ready means that you've got yourself a prophet ready for when he comes back, because you've spent your life making a prophet. So that on the day he comes back, that you're looking out for, that you're keeping watch for, when the doorbell goes and the master's there, you've got, it's okay, he's here because I've got a prophet for him. And so then the next question is, well, what does that actually mean, making a prophet? It still sounds too generic. It still sounds too vague. And a bit like a camera that's focusing and starting blurred and becoming more and more focused. This parable, honestly, it punches you in the gut with its clarity, because it tells you boldly and clearly the exam question on the exam of your life. And so if you've got this question really laser focus and sharp in your head, then you'll be fine. You'll be ready. That's what it means to be ready. That's what it means to keep watch, is being ready to answer this question. Okay? So that's what we're looking at today. So this is why it's not complicated, this stuff, like I said at the very beginning, but it's really important, really important. Okay, so we before we go any further, can I just get everyone to stand up? Brilliant. So if you were born in January to June, can you come and sit on this side? And if you were born in July to just December, can you just come and find a set chair anywhere on this side? Wow, look, there you go. A lot more on this side. The left and the right. Now, we have just done something in a nice, light, it doesn't matter sort of way, something that's going to happen to us in a massively weighty way. Okay? Look down at verse 31. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. Just flick back to in the middle of chapter 24. He's talking about the destruction of the temple, and he wants to distinguish the destruction of the temple, which is a cataclysmic event for Israel. It destroyed the nation, basically, with something even bigger, which is the return of Jesus. And he says in verse 27, just so you know the difference, even though the destruction of the temple will be big, the coming of the Son of Man will be really big. Verse 27, he says, for as lightning comes from east is from west, is visible, even in the west, sorry, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. In other words, when Jesus comes back, he won't creep in the back door and everyone goes, oh, was that, what did that? As east is from west, as it says here in the sheep and goats parable, he says, in all his glory, with all the angels to sit on his glory. I mean, the world will know about this. Okay? This won't happen in a back room. And verse 32, could you imagine this? All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people, just as we've just done, one from another, like a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. The point of the sheep and the goats, in all these parables, we've had people that were identical. We had servants. I mean, they were wicked and faithful, but they were still all servants. They all dressed the same, in the same clothes. You've got two women working at the mill. You've got two guys working in the field. You've got 10 bridesmaids. They all look the same, but underneath there was and the same with the sheep and goats. I guess sheep and goats kind of look similar. I think they look even more similar in the Middle East than they do in the West. And so they're kind of, but there is a fundamental difference. There is a DNA difference. And that's why there's some on the left and some on the right. And just as we were all, I guess, mixed up a minute ago, and there was a moment where he said, right, I want some that way and some that way. And there's a chasm in the middle. And in a sense, whilst you're all looking at the Lord, you're looking over there, and you guys are looking all over there, and you're in this moment where you're thinking, I wonder why he separated us. I wonder why we're on this side. And I wonder why, oh, look, there's so-and-so from my church that's on the other side. I wonder why that is. There's that moment of, I wonder. It's like the moment before an exam, just before you turn over the paper. And he's going to say to those on the right, so excuse me for a moment, just sit there for a moment, because I'm now talking to these people over here, the people on my right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming over here. Let me say something just to you for a moment. You can just listen. Verse 34. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was ill, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. So you're sitting there wondering, oh, well, why why are we sitting on this side? And that's his explanation. Let me say 4 things about what he says there, or what happens in this bit. Click that on a minute. Go on, son. You might have to click me on, I'm afraid. I don't know why, but that's not working. You can click me on. Keep going. There's the most important exam. We talked about that. Next one. We've done the reading. Yeah, we've finished the talk. There you go. 4 things. 4 things on there. Reward, and it was the same on both. The reward, the reason, the surprise, and the explanation. So let's think about the reward, first of all. Verse 34, I'm saying to you guys, you've got a reward. Isn't this exciting? Come you who are blessed by my Father, verse 34, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. It's worth saying, of course, that really in this exam paper, there's another question that doesn't come up in this this passage, which is the prior question, which is also on the exam, which is, who's Jesus? And that's the question the Gospels ask. Who is this man Jesus? And your answer to that question will indicate whether you're in or not. Okay, that question is, who do I think Jesus is? Do I think Jesus is my Lord? Do I trust in him? Or do I think he's just a random bloke that's irrelevant to me? So that's the most important question. So in a sense, of course, the reason that we'll be in heaven, any of us, and we've talked about this, and we just had it read from Ephesians 2, it's by grace. It's always by grace. The reason any of us are saved is by grace. We were made servants because we were hanging around in the courtyard, and he said, hey, do you want a job? He saved us by grace. And you even see this in this verse, don't you, in verse 34? It's a kingdom prepared for you from when? From the foundation of the world, before the Big Bang, or whatever you want to call it. Your name was already written there. And so you couldn't have done anything to have earned your place. Now it says in the book of Revelation, there was a book of life, and it's got a list of names in it. And that name was written in there before you were even conceived. So it has to be by grace before we did anything. And of course, inheritance, take your inheritance. I mean, how does anyone get an inheritance? You didn't, I've washed enough cars. You got an inheritance because you happen to be born to the right mum or dad. You could be a horrible wick, right? And your next door neighbor could be lovely, but they don't inherit your parents' house. Just you do, just because of virtue of who your parents are. Nothing you did. So from the foundation of the world, we receive our inheritance that God has given for us. It's all by grace. However, the distinction here that's being made between the sheep and the goats is fundamental, is different, it's really important. And that's the point of this parable. That's the sharpness of this parable. So as long as we understand grace is the basis on which people are in heaven, that's really important. But the reason that you guys are sat here and you guys are sat here, he says in verse 35, and that's the second thing, the reason. Verse 35, I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was a stranger, you welcomed me. I was naked, you clothed me. I was sick, you visited me. I was in prison, you came to me. Came to who? Came to me. He says, you came to me. Can you imagine the Lord in all his glory, surrounded by angels, terrifying judge? And he says, you came and visited me in prison. You clothed me when I was naked. You fed me when I was hungry. And you lot are sitting there going, what? That's the surprise. That's verse 37, I guess, is it? Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when do we see you hungry or feed you or thirsty or give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger or invite you in or needing clothes to clothe you? When did we see you ill or in prison or go to visit you? It's quite hand up. It's like a great drama, this, isn't it? All of the things heaped up. When did we see all of those things? Here's the punchline. This is so important, verse 40, isn't it? It's the explanation. It's a kind of a pantomime moment, really. Truly, I tell you, amen, amen, I say to you, whatever you did for the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you did for me. Bang. And all of you lot are over here going, oh, great, I didn't put the two and two together, I didn't clock. But yeah, you're right. I have been working really, really hard for your brothers and sisters, for the people in my church, for Christians, whoever I met them, whatever I did, I always wanted to do this. And I did it because of you. I didn't realize I was doing it to you. Do you see how Jesus identifies with his people? I think this is why the bags of gold are people and not talents, you see, because there's something really precious. And it's more than just something precious. He says, he is me. When the Lord Jesus makes us his people, his children, I mean, all these metaphors are important in different ways, aren't they? We're sons of the living God. We're servants of the living God. But more than that, we are one with him. Where the marriage metaphor is so important, where we marry Jesus, we're one with him, we're indivisibly one, we're not separate from him, we are cleaved to him. Or the Bible word often is used is we are in Christ, like a branch is in a vine, like a man and woman are one. We are in him and he is in us. Apart, totally stuck. You're one now. And so what I do for you and what I do for you and what I pray for you and what I say to you, I'm doing it to Jesus, because that's Jesus and that's Jesus and that's Jesus in this room right now. And I think all the people, that's what's great in this, in the story here, in the pantomime story. I didn't. Yeah. What did you do for me? That's the question on the exam paper. Have you ever thought that when you do the children's work, or when you click a button and you're doing some prep on the computer, or when you're donating money, or whatever you do for the Lord, for the church, you're literally doing it to Jesus Christ. So let me just, I've done my bit for you. Can I just speak to you just for a moment? Because you guys are on the other side. Here's the fact. And it's exactly the same. Oh, can you just kick us back? Oh, one. That's the one. It's the same, but the opposite way around. So verse 41. And he'll say to those on his left, and you can just sort of listen in, because there's a big gulf here, and this is not really relevant to you. It's just for these guys. Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. There's the punishment. You who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. I think there's a lot of, as these parables go on, there's a lot of sharpening and clarification. But there seems to be, he goes through all the descriptions that he classically uses about hell, and you get them layered up. So we've seen, haven't we, previously, the weeping and gnashing of teeth. We've seen the dark, which I think is to do with dread and fear and sadness and massive regret. We've seen the darkness, which is terror, fear. Now we get the fire. And the fire isn't a medieval invention for random paintings. That's Jesus's stuff. You get that picture of fire lots in the Bible. In fact, the Old Testament or visual image of hell is this place Gehenna, which was the fire, the rubbish dump where they burnt all the rubbish. So like you've seen an incinerator, oh, there's a massive one in between Sutton and Croydon and Beddington Way. It's just always, it's always that was a picture of hell. It's a picture of fire. Now, why fire? Because it's torment. You might know the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, and the rich man is in hell. He's in agony in these flames. It physically hurts. It's physical torment to be in hell forever. I hate talking about hell, but it's so important that we talk about it. That's why Jesus says it. If you're in hell forever, you're in a place of grief, a place of frustration. I shouldn't be here. Why am I here? If only I'd listened. If only I'd not ignored it. And also, I'm in physical agony, and it goes on and it goes on And that's all I think about in the future. This will be happening next month and next year and next decade. And this is all I'll ever know, with no hope of it ever changing. And more than that, it's depart from me, he says. So, of course, the Lord Jesus is Lord over heaven and hell. I mean, he's in the same way that I guess a judge who sends a person to prison still has authority over that person while they're in prison. The judge can change it so that they get released from prison. He still has authority, but the judge is not present with them in prison. There's a sense in which it's leave my presence and go to somewhere awful, even though I still have authority. So Jesus still has authority over hell. And yet there's a very real sense in which instead of saying, come into my banquet, it's depart from me. Because of being apart from him is being apart from all that is blessing. We still live in a world, don't we, right now, where the Lord Jesus reigns. And so there's blessing and curse. But one day that will be north and south. Blessing all here, no curse. Curse all here, no blessing. And what's the reason? It's the same kind of incredulity on both sides. Verse 42, for I was hungry and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, you did not clothe me. I was ill and in prison and you did not look after me. And they will also answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or stranger or needing clothes or ill or in prison and did not help you? And you could see why that would seem unfair. I didn't see you. I haven't done anything to you, Jesus. And that is the attitude of most people. I've never done anything bad to Jesus. And he'll reply, verse 45. Truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. How you treated my people is how you treated me. How you treated my money that I left with you is how you treated me. And so you're doing this for Jesus. Now, let me just say a bit about social action. Jesus isn't saying that you shouldn't love everybody. He absolutely does. And in the Good Samaritan parable, that's where you really get that, I think, really clearly. The question put to him there is, who's my neighbour? Who do I have to love here? How many people do I actually have to love? Can I limit it just to the people I like? And he says, no, foreigner, came across him. So we want to love whoever we can, wherever we come across it. And so that's why, I didn't catch all of what Dave was talking about, where you want to be, what's your phrase? The first one, engage as many people as you can with the love of Christ, something like that, isn't it? Engage the community with loving intention. Yeah, loving intention. So actually, there you are. The Good Samaritan loved the person he came across. He couldn't love the entire world, but there was and you do come across people in Putney, right? So you want to love that's a right and appropriate thing. But I really like this verse in Galatians. I find this a brilliant summary. Love and love. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. It seems a bit odd, doesn't it, to ignore your mum but be nice to the little old lady down the road. That's just everyone gets that. So especially, and I think this parable, particularly the sheep and the goats, really clarifies that. Especially, why? Because the people who are Jesus' people are Jesus, and what you do for them, you do for him. So don't hear me say social action doesn't matter. It does. Love everybody, but especially those of the family of faith. Absolutely. Look, the parable is not that complicated. I don't really need to do any more teaching, but let me push through a few application thoughts and then we can have some discussion. How do we get prepared for the exam of our life? Do you know the story? I mentioned it yesterday. Christmas Carol, Charles Dickens. and you've got Scrooge. Do you know the story? And he has three different ghosts visit him. There's the ghost of the past that shows him what he's done, and the ghost of the present. So he kind of gets this idea that there's, I think it was, am I right? Bob Cratchit and his Tiny Tim, and he's not being kind to him on Christmas Day, and they're poor and they're starving. And then the key one, the one that really punch, is the ghost of Christmas Future, where he sees the future and he sees that little Tiny Tim's going to die, and that everyone is going to disdain him and hate him. And when he dies, they'll all be really glad because they all hate him. And it's really looking down the barrel of the path that he's on in the future that shapes him up so that he changes the present. And that's the point of this, all of these parables, and particularly this last one, is you're supposed to see the it's my dream, isn't it? Don't know anything on the exam paper. If you can reverse that, the dream helps you realize I don't want to get to that point. If you know the question on the exam paper, you can spend your life having prepared the answer. You got it right. It's no different to the getting the bag of gold and making a profit for the whole of your life. So the question is, do you know the question? Do you know the question on your exam paper so that you're prepared for it? And the question is the thing that Jesus said there. Whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me. What did you do for me? What did you do for my brothers and sisters? Because what you did for them, you did for me. That's the question. That's the only question that's on the paper. Just that one. And the clearer you've got that in your head, I mean, go home and put it on your bedroom wall or something. Because the clearer you've got that in your head, the clearer your life is and what you're doing. If you've got the future clear, it changes what you do in the present, I think. That's what the point of the illustration with Christmas Carol. Let me just tell you, conversely, some of the things which are not on the actual exam paper of your life. These are not on the papers. Really, have you ever done this? Teacher does this. Just so you know what's not in the paper is really helpful, so you don't revise it. These are the things that are not on the paper. Your marital status is not on the paper. Some of us will never get married, and it will be really hard for us, and it will really hurt. And other of us will get married. And do you know whether you got married or not is not on the exam paper? Whether you have children or not, some of us will have heartache because we can't have children for different physical reasons or marital reasons, and other of us will have tons of children. How many children you have, and will not be on the exam paper, and nor will how great your children are. You know, some of us will send our children off to amazing private schools, and they'll be proficient at tennis, and they'll play cricket for England, and they'll be the next Mahatma Gandhi or something, and you'll be so proud, and you'll be such an amazing parent that you did that. And other of us will have like kids that really flunked it, whatever. And that's really important at the school gates, and when you go to school reunions and they ask you how are your kids, but it's not on this paper. It's just irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Your status at work, that's not on the paper either, actually. You know, because I know when you're at work, you know, who you are and your status, it matters. You know, most jobs these days, you've got a really rigid ranking system. It's like being in the army. Some of you are in the army, and everyone knows where everyone stands in the caste system of your office. And again, you go to your school reunions and you say, oh, look, they've managed to get to there and he's got to there. And you've got that kind of job, have you? Oh, you know, it really affects who you are, doesn't it? But the funny thing is, on the last day, actually, that's not on the paper. How big your house is, or how amazing the interior is, or the garden, or the driveway, or the car, which, you know, you get to a certain age and you look at houses, well, that's a nice house. By the way they've done that. Oh, I'll never be able to afford that. Doesn't matter. It's just not on the paper. It will be so irrelevant. It will be laughable. How good looking you are, or how popular you are, how many friends you are, your social life. however many hobbies you've got, however good you are at whatever it is, it's just not on there. It's irrelevant, I'm afraid. You've revised the wrong thing. However many countries you've been to, or experiences you've had, places you've seen, things you've known, which are great for dinner parties. And you can feel like, oh, I've not really ever been out of the M25. Yeah. Do you know what? Actually, you realise on that last day when you turn the exam paper over, oh, actually, it didn't matter after all. I was so worried about it all my life, but it didn't matter. However many achievements you've accomplished, whether you've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro or been knighted or won X Factor, whatever it is, you can feel rubbish, can't you? You can feel like, I've never done anything in my life. But actually, then you realise when you turn over the exam paper, oh, that wasn't on there either. That guy, he was so good. She was brilliant. Oh, look, you can imagine their faces. They turn over the paper and they realise, oh, it wasn't on there. Spent all those years. And it just wasn't on there. There's only one question on the exam paper of your life. What did you do for other Christians? Because you did it for him. And the clearer we've got that, the more focused and wise our life will be. So the obvious question is, and this you can chat about this in groups, what are you working so hard for in your life? Now, I mean, we had it earlier, didn't we? Some of us have got mental jobs and you've got busy families, and I get that. The default basis assumption is we're all knackered. Everyone's knackered, right? I get that. But that's not kind of the question. We've all got stuff we've got to do, right? But I guess the question underneath the question is, where is your heart? Where is your drive? Where is your passion? What gets you up in the morning? What are you actually living for? Because you can have a busy job and live your all, heart, soul, mind, and strength for the Lord Jesus. You can do that. Let me give you a few practical bits, and then you can talk about this in groups. One is attendance. Get to church every week. I mean, it's once a week where you can actually see other Christians and actually encourage them and actually clothe, feed, help other Christians. It's easy there. It's on a plate. And so many people in church, they've got a birthday party to be at, or they've got a weekend away that they want to get to. I don't know, all sorts of stuff. And I just want to encourage you, get yourself to church, be there. That's what vicar was supposed to say, because I'm a vicar. But in 20 million years' time, the thing that you'll be glad you did was stick around and give your all to each other. And actually, do you know what? Maybe you're the core, and there's half a dozen other people aren't here, but you guys seem to me on the outside that you were doing that really well. So keep doing that. Keep being there for each other. Serving. We talked about this briefly yesterday, and it was a really good question, wasn't it? And some of us are just exhausted. You've been on that rota for many, many years, and you've spent, and you don't feel you've got anything left in the tank. And do you know what? The emphasis these days on mental health is important. You don't want to burn out, because actually if you burn out, you've got less in the tank for the rest of your life. So it's important that you look after yourself. However, I do want to encourage you that this is what matters. And every cup of, there's another bit in Matthew's gospel where he says, for every little cup of cold water you give to one of my little ones, you will by no means lose your reward. So if you can even get to the point where you're handing out cold water after church, brilliant. Because they're his little ones, because they're his people, because they're him. And so even when you're spent, don't lose the love for people. I think that's what can happen. It becomes this, oh, I don't want to do this because I'm sick and tired of people. Don't lose the love for the people. And then you can serve in all sorts of tiny little ways. Because you love him, you love them. because they are him. So if you're knackered, maybe there's seasons where you've got to pull out. But I pray you'll be so glad for everything, every cup of cold water you'll be glad of for the rest of forever, because that's all that's on the paper. And then just a couple of other things. One is spiritual gifts. Do you know, if I asked you, what's your spiritual gifts? Gifts. Would you know how to answer that question? Would you know how to answer that? The Bible says we all have spiritual gifts because God's people, he equips us to love each other. So he helps us to all have the ability to be able to help each other. So if I said to you, so in one sense, we should all do all these things. We should all serve in any way we can. How can I serve? What can I do? How can I help? But it's just brilliant to know what the Lord has particularly gifted you with, so that you maximally do lots of that. If you are a giver, then give with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. If you are a prayer, then make sure you pray and you have the time to do that. If you're an evangelizer, don't get stuck in board meetings and stuff for church. You need to be on the streets and in people's houses and doing your evangelism. If you, whatever your, I don't know what your gifts are. If you can know what they are, maximize those. And of course, the whole point of gifts is that they're given. So ask him for more gifts because he gives them. You're not stuck in a rigid, that's to me for the rest of my life. That's the whole point of a gift. Ask for more gifts. Ask for greater gifts that I can do for others. And if you don't know what your gift is, try to find out, because you do have one. You all do. Ask your husband or your friend or your someone in church. Take some of the spiritual gift surveys. I do them. They're quite helpful sometimes. Ask the Lord. Try stuff out and do it and see what happens and what seems to work and what seems to bless others. And then finally, one last thing is prayer. I just got this. It's my personal thing. It's my big thing in my heart. When you pray for each other, you are praying for Jesus. That is one of the greatest acts of love. And anyone can do that and always do that. And I don't just mean at the end of your groups on a Wednesday night or whenever you meet. I mean, always. Every time you get out of bed, have you got lists where you pray for other people in church? Pray for other Christians around the world who are doing stuff. Because every little prayer you pray, and every time you lie in and can't be bothered, you'll be glad you did it. Every little prayer. Those are just a few scatterings of ideas. But the big thing is, and it's the one question is, at the end of our time, on the day when we'll all have to stand up and he'll say, left, right. When you turn over that exam paper, there's only one question. There's only one thing that matters. Only one. That's why these parables are so brilliant. What did you do for me? Because you did it for my brothers and sisters.